Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Kourou in French Guiana. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter for Spaceflight. Now, so good of you to be with us in our special coverage of the first inaugural flight of an Ariane 6 rocket. Let's go ahead and bring in some live views of the pad. You saw a little bit of a sneak peek before we rolled that intro, but you can see the rocket to my right here. They're sitting at the pad just a few miles away from where the Ariane 5 formally launched. It took its last flight back in 2023, almost a year ago to the day from when the Ariane 6 will launch. And the teams with the European Space Agency, with Ariane Space, and with CNES, the French Space Agency, have been hard at work, busily preparing this rocket for its inaugural launch today. We've got a lot to talk about with this mission, from the development of the launch vehicle to the payloads on board to getting to this launch day today, what the launch day is going to look like, and then what the future of this rocket is going to be as it is entering in a landscape that is far different than when the Ariane 5 first took the stage back many years ago. So as we take a look at this rocket full frame, you see this is a two-stage launch vehicle with the payloads sitting up top. This is a ride-share mission with a multitude of CubeSats on board, including a payload for NASA, a pair of CubeSats known together as Kourou. And we'll talk about more of the payloads in more detail. But fortunately, we are not alone in our launch coverage today. We are joined by a friend of the channel and a longtime friend of our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast today. And you can see in the box below me, we are joined by Frederic Castel, who is a longtime space reporter who has been around the world to basically every launch pad that's out there. Spent years working for AFP, is also reported for BBC World Service, for Space News, and has been covering the Ariane program for quite some time. And we're very fortunate, Frederic, that you're joining us today. How are you, sir, as you're joining us there at the European Space Agency headquarters?
Fine. Everything is fine here. A lot of VIP guests and a lot of people around Paris. Even with a soccer game, they give up to come to see the launch, hopefully.
It's a busy time in France right now. Of course, it's an election week. You've got the preparation for the Olympics coming up later this month. And of course, the debut of a new rocket. I'm sure the city is just abuzz with excitement right now.
Indeed, indeed. The political news are the prime news right now. Then there is some soccer tonight. At the same time, we'll see, hopefully, Ariane 6 uh, being launched. So yeah, it's pretty active. There are a lot of Secretary of States who are invited here tonight at ESA headquarters, but probably they don't show up because we have a crisis here. We don't know what is the next government. So a lot of people are interested by space, but they are also worried by other issues.
Yeah, lots to keep on the mind these days. Certainly not a boring time there in France and in Paris specifically. But we're very glad to have you there in the thick of it as far as the European continent. But the action that we're seeing, or we'll see in now about L minus 53 minutes, 13 seconds, is down in French Guiana. And for those who may not be terribly familiar, this is a European rocket, but it does not launch from the continent of Europe. It is down in Kourou in French Guiana in somewhat of a jungle atmosphere. So, Frederic, you've had the opportunity to travel down there numerous times. I unfortunately have never been myself. So, if you could regale us with, what the sounds, what the sights are like when you're at that environment, what is it like there at the European Launch Center?
So it's a very interesting spaceport because it's in South America, just north of Brazil, and just you have Suriname on the other side, and in the middle of jungle, which is the beginning of Amazonia, really jungle that you cannot get through. You cannot go through. You have just by the sea, so the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. You have this huge launch site with a lot of pads, a lot of history, because in 1968, when the French people had to leave Algeria, where they had their launch site, they switch and they hesitate Australia, a lot of places around the world, and then they choose the one which was the best because it's so close to the equator. It's just 5 degrees latitude from the equator. So when you launch, of course, a rocket, you have uh, much more payload weight mass that you can bring into orbit because of the rotation of the Earth. It's better, much better than Baikonur, of course, even better than Cape Canaveral or Kennedy Space Center. And also, it has another advantage that they can launch because of the situation. They can launch north for polar orbits or on geostationary and horizontal using the full rotation of the Earth. And also the best little detail, it's so close to the equator that you never have any hurricane. So that's another advantage. You don't have to stop your operations. This is the place. Then there are 1,600 employees, and you have a lot of it's a special. It's not like KSC, Kennedy Space Center, because you have a mix of the CNES, which has really the land, because you are in France. We are really in France. Then you have the ESA facilities, the European Space Agency. Then you have a lot of industrial. In that case, for Ariane 6, you have Ariane Group, which is a huge aerospace group with several entities from Europe. And you have Ariane Space, which is not Ariane Group. It's not the key entity tonight. Is the one which is selling the commercial activity of Ariane. So Ariane Space is just the business part, and it's an independent company which works for CNES, ESA, and the industry. This is a short presentation.
And we certainly appreciate it, since it's been, as I mentioned at the top of our broadcast, just over a year since the last Ariane 5 launch. So good for everyone to brush up on this. And before we go too much farther, certainly want to welcome our live audience who is joining with us this afternoon. Appreciate the more than 1,400 of you who are hopping in here with us live. And if you haven't already, be sure to click that like button to allow some more folks to find their way into this live stream as well. We'll be monitoring the chat for super chat comments for either myself or for Frederic. If you are joining as a new channel member, we'll try to shout you out as well. But there's a lot to talk about with this mission, so we're going to mostly keep our conversation about the rocket and the Ariane program on the whole. But of course, we have a live audience and we'd love to engage with you as the clock ticks down. And because this is also an inaugural launch, we plan to be with you for the full duration of this mission. So lasts a couple of hours. So we'll have plenty of time to revisit some live member questions, some super chats as we continue on. So just want to do a little bit of housekeeping there as we get things rolling. Before we come back to our conversation with Frederic, just want to give sort of an overview of what the timeline looks like for this mission. Going to go ahead and bring up our countdown timeline momentarily, just getting that pulled up here at the moment.
It's
so far feeling, though, Frederic, seems to be moving along on track from what we've heard from the European Space Agency. From there at the headquarters, how are things seem to be progressing from your point?
Here, so about 400 VIPs are in the main room. I'm not there because it's a pretty noisy place, and they are following on a huge screen with a lot of expectation. They are following the countdown, and they have a few experts. One of them, Julio Montreal, who has been a launch director for years, who is an expert of Ariane 5, who is the official spokesman for ESA to explain the situation. He will join us hopefully a bit later, but a lot of people are, of course, want to speak to him.
Certainly understandable. I'm sure he's quite in demand
it is,
right now.
Willie, I don't know if you that we if you want to go to a little bit the history of not the full history of Ariane, but just to a few facts. Like 26 years ago, after 40 seconds, the first Ariane 5 blew up because of a software issue which was not managed. But it became a very reliable launcher over the years. And it even launched the James Webb telescope. So it shows how much NASA, ESA, and other partners were believed that it was an excellent launcher. But as you said, it's a year ago the last Ariane 5 was launched.
And in the process of developing the Ariane 6, obviously it's been, several years behind where they were hoping to have it. Obviously, sort of, if you want to use an American rocket analogy, like the Atlas V and the Delta to the Vulcan, they wanted to have some overlap between the two rockets. So one didn't retire before you had the new one introduced. So there was sort of a seamless overlap. Given that that's not the case that we've seen here with the Ariane 5 to Ariane 6 and the challenges that have also been presented with the Vega to the Vega C rocket, how much of, I guess, a point of consternation has that been for, agencies like ESA and for Arianespace?
It has been a big issue that this overlap didn't work. It worked very well between Ariane 4 and Ariane 5 more than 26 years ago. In that case, 4 years late. So more frustrated, I believe. Tonight we were speaking about the VIPs. There are a lot of military people here from the Space Force and other militaries, and they are very frustrated by the fact that they couldn't launch for the past few years their own satellites. So it's a big concern. I spoke several times even to the Secretary of the Army of Defense, the French one, and they complain nonstop to have this Ariane 6 work. And of course, also other entities like we'll speak about science satellites and Galileo satellites, which is the European GPS. They had to launch with to rely on SpaceX, and using the Falcon 9. They will have even I think another launch in the fall because there is no more rocket. But things have been not really lucky. Not only it took 4 years, and the argument from the industry who is behind that is that there was the pandemic, there was electronic issues, there were technical also issues. So that's why it took so much time. It's exactly 10 years from the start of this huge program. But even they were not too lucky in Europe, because you had also the smaller rocket, the Vega, Italian-made Vega rocket, which had a third accident and a third failure. So it's stuck. We don't have in Europe this small one. And also there was an excellent backup for launching, for example, just 2 small satellites of the mass of Galileo. And there they were using the Russian Soyuz. But because of the war, the sanctions against Russia made Russia decide to stop totally to launch the Soyuz from French Guiana, which was a big asset. So you had the three rockets, and the 3 rockets are down and not working. So it's essential, crucial, to see this Ariane 6 succeeding quickly.
Yeah, it's sort of even more than a 1-2 punch, more of like a 1-2-3 punch, as you were saying, with all of those, creating almost the perfect storm, an unfortunate perfect storm for Europe and not having its own access to space. Currently T-minus 42 minutes, 20 seconds and counting before the planned liftoff at 3 p.m. Want to pause and pivot briefly to talk about the launch countdown timeline, just so folks have a sense of where we are with things and where we're going in the next little bit here. So in the live picture that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the mobile gantry behind the Ariane 6 rocket that was removed back at about 8.5 hours prior to the planned liftoff. They got the green light from a weather standpoint to go ahead and move that. Then, of course, before fueling began, there was another weather briefing getting into that process. Fueling began about 5 hours and 20 minutes prior to liftoff, with the chill down of the feed lines to the upper stage, where they began loading liquid oxygen first. That was followed 20 minutes later by liquid hydrogen on the upper stage. Moving on down to the first stage, or the lower stage, chill down process started at about L minus 4 hours, 9 minutes. That was followed up by about L minus 3 hours, 54 minutes for the chill down of the feed lines to the lower stage, with liquid oxygen load beginning there. Coming up in about 20 or so minutes, there will be another weather briefing and another final weather check at T minus 10 minutes before a planned liftoff. Now, in the process of moving back the mobile gantry, they did encounter a small ground systems issue, which ESA says they were able to resolve and were able to move along, but they adjusted the T0 planned liftoff time from the opening of the 4-hour window today, which was at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1800 UTC, moved that back to the current T0 at 3 p.m. or 1900 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Rounding things out at the T minus 5 minute mark, things will start to sync up as far as the launch teams there. Then they'll enter into final topping off at T minus 4 minutes 50 seconds on the upper stage LOX tank. Lower stage LOX topping off happens within that same minute as well. And then just before the 4 minute mark, lower stage LH2 or liquid hydrogen topping finishes up. Same on the upper stage at T minus 3 minutes 15 seconds. Then the main engine on the Ariane 6 rocket, the Vulcain, will ignite at T minus 7 seconds. And then we'll see hopefully a good liftoff of the rocket at T0, which again is targeting 3 o'clock Eastern time, 1900 UTC, or as it currently stands, L minus 39 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Now, for whatever reason, they do need to hold things a little bit more. They can hold off on finalizing topping of those tanks that I just mentioned. Their launch window lasts until 6 p.m. Eastern today, so they do have some margin to move things around if necessary. So, Frederic, want to bring you back into the conversation now that we've gone through what folks can expect over the next hour. As we're getting into this point where, fueling principally has ended and we're getting into about the last 40 minutes or so, when you're down there in French Guiana, with the launch teams, I guess, what is the typical mood? Obviously different for an inaugural launch of a rocket, but generally speaking, when you've been there for previous Ariane missions, set the scene for what it's like at this point in the count.
First of all, just the environment. There is, as we said, the jungle, but also for every launch, they have a lot of security. So you have hundreds of French soldiers, even the French Legion, who are trained to work in the jungle, and they spend the night before on site to be sure that everything is safe. There is no terrorism, no drones. You have the Navy at sea, a little bit at KC, like at KC. And in that case, for this launch, they didn't send an AWACS plane, the big plane with the radar system. In that case, they send 3 Rafale. The Rafale are the state of the art of the French combat aircraft. just to be around if some threat would happen. So that's the term of security. And you have even it's when you are there, it's amazing to see you see some firemen, but the firemen from Paris. Who knows why? But the brigade in French Guiana are not from Guiana. They are from Paris. So it's amazing to see this. Otherwise, after you go to the Jupiter Center, where you have the press site and another VIP and all the managers and the control center. And there, of course, there is a lot of excitement and tension, especially, of course, this afternoon there. It's 1 hour more than the East Coast in the States, so it's almost the same time. It's in the afternoon. And from what I hear, because I've been in touch with several people, including some launch directors or previous launch directors, is that of course they are concerned. They are at the same time they are very confident. Some people, for example, the launch director of ESA was telling me that they are 98% confident, but they have also 2% where they are worried that things work because it's something to test and to have on the ground, and then it's something else to launch. So it's a very different approach. That's why it took almost 10 years. We don't have the SpaceX approach. We have the classical approach. It means that they develop this rocket, they check subparts, bigger parts, stage, floor, they check, and finally they launch. So that's why it takes so many years. As we know, SpaceX and especially Starship doesn't work this way. It has another method. We don't know if it's better or worse. Time will say. But so tonight is the big day, and the engineers, the launch directors, the launch teams are very tense. And also it's a new generation there in Kourou. So you have the younger one, because I was seeing in VIP some previous launch directors. They say, you are not in Kourou. I was asking, you are not in Kourou? No, we have the new generation, younger one, with little experience, but of course they have to start and begin at some point to handle a launch, and this is the big day today.
Yeah, you got to get your feet wet sometime, and what better than a debut of a new rocket to really kickstart a career? It's got to be quite the moment for those young engineers who maybe have come out of university and this is their first real experience with getting a rocket, through the production process down to the pad and, seeing how it shakes out.
Plus,
You
if I may,
mentioned,
yeah,
oh,
sorry.
go ahead, please.
No. Plus, they have the responsibility. They have a long tradition. Their Ariane has been an incredible success for decades. So you have to keep with the tradition of success. It was perhaps an expensive rocket, but it was the state-of-the-art rocket. So they have a tradition. They are not just it's not a little startup company trying to launch a micro launcher. It's a big tradition, so they have to keep with it. A lot of these engineers have a lot of training still. It's not their first experience with the French Guiana. The teams are there for years before launching.
Yeah,
Over.
and absolutely. What I was gonna say was, in the thought of how long this rocket and various pieces and parts have been in development, it's just in preparation for our launch coverage today was, of course, going back and looking through old articles and things that have been written about the various parts of the rocket, and seeing release from ESA talking about the first hot fire test of the Vinci upper stage engine from back in 2005. So you talk about what the various players are looking at as far as that upper stage, because this is one of the biggest pieces. That's the difference between the Ariane 5 and the Ariane 6 is the capabilities of the Vinci engine and what goes into that upper stage, right?
Exactly, because the first the the first stage is, there are a lot of new things, but still it's the classical. It should be it has a lot to do with the Ariane 5, but then the upper stage with Vinci, and to make it reignitable, That's fundamental, and that's new. And that you cannot, of course, simulate that on the ground. You have to be in space and try to test it. So we'll see tonight. This engine should be reignitable 5 times. That's the conception. But for this mission, it will be 3 times. We'll see if it works. So that's really the critical challenge of this mission. Of course, any launch is a dangerous launch, but it's a risk. There is a risk. But okay, the critical part is this new kind of engine, which is very useful, as we know, for the constellation, like Kuipers or like any other constellation. You need to put in orbit because you need to reach different orbital planes.
And it also, the Vinci engine works in concert with the auxiliary propulsion unit, right? Which, is a little bit different than some of the other rockets currently flying. Can you give us sort of a brief breakdown of sort of the interplay between those two parts of the upper stage?
So I'm not an engineer. I'm a journalist, and so these APU are used to maintain and to put some pressure on the cryogenic propellants. That's the main purpose, not to have this liquids at very low temperature floating around. So that's the main idea by using this system to see and to try to get 3 reignition in orbit.
Absolutely. And note for Stephen in the back there, if you can prep video 3, just want to sort of give some context for this launch that we're going to see here nominally in just about 30 minutes or so. Now, this soundbite that we're going to listen to momentarily, this is a clip from the CEO of Ariane Space, and this was back earlier this month, or last month, I should say, when they announced July 9th as the target launch date for this inaugural flight, talking about, some of the expectations for them with this rocket and, how they're expecting it to set the stage moving forward, from here on. So let's go ahead and listen in. This is Stéphane Israel. Let's go ahead and play this.
So on behalf of Ariane Space, I also want to pay my tribute to the team who made Ariane 6 and who is about to make it a big success. We have in our order book already 30 launches to deliver. It is with no precedent to have so many launches to deliver for a rocket which has not flown yet. We have key missions for Europe to deliver: Galileo missions, EUMETSAT missions for the French MOD. We have also on board, on top of this autonomous access to space, key operators, international operators: Kuiper Amazon, Intelsat, Eutelsat, Optus from Australia. This rocket is already a success. It is now about to fly. There is something we do not do yet. It's human space flight. Maybe it will happen one day, but we are very happy to have the astronauts with us. Go Ariane 6, go!
That again was the CEO of Ariane Space. So bringing Frederic, you back in here. Obviously, you've been covering the development of the Ariane 6 throughout its whole, pre-launch life. 30 launches on the books. A number of those are institutional missions, but of course, there are also the 18 for Amazon's Project Kuiper. In your conversations with officials and in your reporting, I know you've talked to a number of folks about how they're thinking about the principal use of this rocket and the thought that it's initially going to be designed primarily to fulfill institutional launches like we were talking about earlier with the Galileo constellation and others like that. From your reporting, can you talk about sort of the commercialization and the future of this rocket and sort of how that's being viewed right now?
They are targeting at the same time institutional launches, but also commercial launches. So on the average, once the ramp up works in the next 2 years, then they should have an average of 9 launches per year. Almost half of them should be commercial. So the advantage of, I think, for a lot of customers in the world, even if they see the incredible successes of SpaceX with Falcon 9, to have a backup for launching is essential. And I believe that's why we saw Kuiper's program and managers choosing to have this backup to use Ariane 6 to launch their constellation. And also, of course, I'm sure that the Kuiper's manager want to launch a lot of satellites very quickly, not only from the US, but also from French Guiana, from anywhere where they can have access to space. So that's a big advantage of Ariane. And the servicing, when we speak to some customers, and I'm not advertising anything here, but customers are happy about the quality of service that Ariane, in its tradition, and Ariane Space, we just saw the CEO, are organizing the relationship, the servicing, all that, and even NASA. The best example was that NASA chose Ariane 5 and Ariane Space to launch with ESA the James Webb Telescope, which was, as we know, the most expensive payload ever launched in space. Almost $10 billion, if I remember. I was there. It was a big moment. There was a lot of tension, perhaps like tonight, for this launch. And last word about Vinci. We're speaking about Vinci. I think that even NASA is interested by the Vinci performance, and there are some talks. I don't know what could happen, but I know that NASA is interesting and is in touch with ESA and the European industry about this new engine.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where those talks go and what NASA may have in mind for them. I think obviously the Aerojet Rocketdyne provided engines are what they're using for now, at least with the SLS rocket. But obviously NASA has got a number of things on its plate and a number of potential avenues down the road where we could see the Vinci engine pop up on a later vehicle, or maybe as something that could be transferable to, a commercial provider at some point down the road. Obviously, we're sort of at a point of emergence for a lot of different launch companies. So, ideas about future vehicles could change. We're currently L minus 24 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. We got a sort of a multitude of views as Frederic was talking there from inside the Launch Control Center there, and some of the commentators right now. Want to go ahead and, if we can, bring in the ESA feed as they're sort of giving an overview of the timeline of the mission. We could bring this box big. Yeah, so as we've been talking about, there are going to be a few different relights of the Vinci engine. There are 3 different deployments before those 2 capsules that you see there that will be jettisoned and shot back, which will splash down at the Point Nemo, is what it's referred to as, basically the point of the Pacific Ocean, which is the furthest from any point in from a landmass, which is good when you're talking about sending capsules in a place that have the lowest probability of impacting anyone negatively. Obviously not great if you have an idea of wanting to recover them. So according to ESA, they're not going to be recovering these because it would be cost prohibitive to do so, right?
Exactly.
And, in those first batches of payloads that are going to be deployed, there's a number of CubeSats that are on board, any number of them that we could talk about. But are there any in particular that you've sort of got your eye on, Frederic, that, are particularly interesting to you that are hitching a ride today?
There are a lot of students, experiments. So we didn't get so many details, but there are some interesting one. There are also, of course, the capsule you mentioned, and all that has to do with trying to develop new technologies, even which could help to have a cargo vehicle. ESA is thinking about having a cargo vehicle which could re-enter Earth from space. You have also new technology that could be helping startups, because we have a bunch of startups. That's an amazing effect. We could speak about the SpaceX effect in Europe. You have at least 16 very serious advanced program of micro launchers where they use new technologies. It's private companies to try to build these. So they test some specific technologies on CubeSat to see what happens, and they will get information through telemetry. That's the idea, and that's why it's a pretty long mission. It's because they have to they release, and we have this reignition that we spoke about, which are very important to test the Vinci engine.
Yeah, and as you were talking, and we actually can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the frame, you can see a little bit of gimbling with the principal engine there at the bottom of the Ariane 6 rocket. A nominal thing at this point, just to make sure that the actuation of that engine is in line, right, Frederic?
Yes, they do that on every rocket, just to be sure that I believe, I don't see all the details, but that the actuators and all the systems are mechanically working well.
And it appeared from the brief view that we got that it seems like things are still green on the board. So some positive indications as we're now just about 20 minutes away from the planned liftoff. And right about now is when they were scheduled to have another weather briefing. There should be one more at the L-10 minute mark. And as you can see there, it's a little bit overcast in French Guiana. I don't believe that's terribly out of pocket for launches in this part of the world, right?
Yes, it's often you have a lot of rains and clouds. So it depends the height of the clouds. They are sometimes worried by the crossing winds. That's a big issue. But the forecast was good. The winds, high altitude winds and different altitude winds are okay for launch. But of course, on the inaugural launch, they want to have a pretty good visual image to follow the launcher. And that's why also they have only 2 hours left from the T0, from H0 to launch, because they don't want to launch at night. They want to see the launcher with the special cameras to see everything looks fine. Then future launches will happen at night. That's the idea.
Do you think, and obviously this is the principal certification mission that we're about to see in a little less than 19 minutes from now, but with the first launch, I believe with Flight 3 in the 6-4 configuration with the 4 solids, as opposed to the 2 that you see here right now, do you think they would ideally want to have that launch in the daytime as well if they can manage it? Or do you think at that point in the program, it won't matter as much because they'll have this daylight data today?
About when I speak to engineers who are really involved in this program, they always say, of course, there is a risk on the inaugural launch, but when you look at the history of launchers, at least the first 3 launches of a new rockets are decisive. So I think on the first 3 they will always launch during daytime to be sure that things work properly and they have all the visibility of with the cameras. That's the idea. But they won't feel really totally confident until at least the 3rd or 4th launch. As we know, there have been some very successful launches on the first time, and then on the second mission, you lose your vehicle. So there are a lot of work to do, and on this one, they have hundreds of sensors on this special rocket, which is not full of the payload is pretty light. And during 5 months at least, they will analyze all this data coming from the sensors to see if they fit exactly the model they have about Ariane 6. So the next launch, for sure, they will try to launch as soon as possible, because there are a lot of launches, and there is a waiting list of satellites to be launched, but they want to be sure, so it's before November or December, they won't launch another Ariane 6. If things work well, of course, on this one.
Yeah, and that just, brings me back to one of the points you were making earlier in our conversation, which was folks have about a 98% sort of feeling that things are going to go right, but that, very itchy 2% in the back of their minds, I'm sure goes back to the first flight of Ariane 5, which obviously you were covering as well back then. And, that ended in, catastrophic failure. How much do you think that's really, sitting in the back of their minds as they approach today?
That's for sure. That plays a big role, because a lot of the managers heard or have been there, like I was, to see. We saw the explosion just in front of our eyes. It was just after 46 or 48 seconds. So we could see the launcher going the wrong direction, and then they blew it up for safety reasons. So it's everybody is traumatized by the first launch of Ariane 5 in 1996. So yeah, that's on the mind of everybody. And the amazing thing that even the Director General of ESA, of the European Space Agency, Joseph Aschbacher, Austrian guy, was saying that on the first launch, yeah, who knows why he gave this very negative statistic that 47% of new launchers would go down, wouldn't work, wouldn't be successful on the first launch, on the inaugural launch. So that's a pretty pessimistic, I think, statistics about the launcher in general, because I don't know how you figure that, but that shows how worried people are about this inaugural launch. I'm sure it's between 98% and we hope it's closer to 98% than 47% of failure.
Boy, one can only hope, and like you said, it's sort of a mixed bag when you talk about the inaugural launch for, any player, whether it's a country, whether it's a company. Obviously, we've seen some recent successes on the first go arounds with the SLS rocket and with United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket. So we'll see. The Relativity Space's Terran 1, made it a good way through its maiden flight, and then suffered an anomaly as well, and we've seen that with some other launchers.
Yep. This is the Jupiter room that we see. Well, now we lost the image. That's where you have all the VIPs, and behind the big window, you have all the controllers of the launch team. I don't know if you see it right now. I don't think it's it's on, but we saw it briefly.
Yeah, we can see it now.
And
it appears as though the board is green, not seeing any red flags on the.
Yeah, you see the lights, exactly. The lights are very useful, because right away they pop up red, exactly like the one that the controllers in the launch room are using. So that gives you right away what is okay and what is not. So at this point, everything looks green. People are very concentrated on their job. And guest VIPs there. And and managers are just waiting and holding their breath sometime.
Well, hopefully not literally for the next 12 minutes. I think we don't want to see anybody pass out from the anticipation, certainly. So we're now just under 12 minutes away. There should be one more weather briefing coming up in now just under 2 minutes that they'll take one last go around. The box that's in the upper left-hand corner there, that's above everyone on console right now, Frederic, are those the local journalist or the journalists that have been gathered to cover this launch there from French Guiana? They're out of shot now.
Yes,
They
yes,
were.
I have them also. No, that's another control room because you have two kinds of control room in Kourou. That's the controllers. No, no, you don't have so many journalists. Very few journalists have been allowed to go on this launch. They are. That was a strange thing about the ESA communication because on this first launch, only ESA, the European Space Agency, is in charge of this launch. Then, if things work, Ariane Space will take over the second launch. And their policy about the press was very restricting the number of journalists in a very strange way. So you don't have a big press room at Kourou, and you don't see it for sure. Here you see technicians of the Ariane group. You see on the back Ariane group, which is the big industrial who built and developed this Ariane 6.
Got it. And just as we're getting some live views sort of in multiple points around the launch pad here, from the 20-minute weather briefing, some notes to take away from that. According to ESA, they note that there's currently not a risk of lightning, that winds are about 35 meters, and coastal winds are coming from the southwest at 2 to 3 meters per second. They note that the upper altitude winds are acceptable through the launch window. All that boils down to what we saw and what we're seeing right now, that things are green across the board from a weather perspective. So by all accounts, assuming that everything technically is going well with the rocket itself and the payloads on board, seem to be on track for a liftoff in now less than 9.5 minutes. So as we are coming into the final minutes here, Frederic, in your conversations with ESA, with Ariane Space, with Kness, was there a certain point in the mission when they got past that marker that they told you, okay, we can breathe a little bit easier because we've gotten through point X? I guess for what you've been reporting, what's that mile marker that they're hoping to see well, and then they can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief, or is it just having everything done?
You speak about the full mission of the launcher, or
so when
after ignition. No, for sure. Until the end, they are targeting a full success. As we said, these 3 reignition of the engine are essential. The good release of the different CubeSat and the 2 capsule, and also the last reignition is very important because you have now a law, which is a French law, which is coming all around Europe, is that you have to make re-enter the upper stage of a rocket. It has to re-enter and to be destroyed in the atmosphere because they don't want to have any debris in orbit left. So it's a new law which is quite important for the environment and for Ariane policy to have this final. So of course they are targeting all the objectives are important, and they will breathe of course at different steps that we'll see, but they will just at the end of the mission, which is more than 2 hours from now. And we are, we're 7.5 minutes away of the, and things look good because sometimes we see some bugs, but everything is going well. As we know, during the countdown, hundreds of parameters are analyzed to be sure that things go well, that there is no showstopper. But of course, until T0, we have to follow closely the situation.
And as we approach liftoff, we'll be hearing the voice, hopefully, of the DDO. Can you explain for folks unfamiliar with that role, the importance of that person on console?
This person, the DDO, Director of Operation, that's exactly the translation. It's not only just the launch director, but they overview the ensemble of things. You need that all the ground station are working, that no boats around, no threats, no drones, that the launcher is okay. That's the DDO has this kind of overview to see if everything goes well. Hopefully, during the mission, we'll have as a guest Julio Montreal, who is right now at the ESA headquarters. He has been DDO for dozens of Ariane launches, and we'll ask him some more questions about the tension and the responsibility of launching these machines, which are so sophisticated and so expensive.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah. 10 years of work on this Ariane 6. It's with a lot of novelties. So
yeah, novel is certainly a good word for where we are right now, as we're just about to hit the 5-minute mark.
Yep.
Coming up in about 20 seconds, they'll begin concluding, topping off on all the various.
Attention pour la séquence finale lanceur. Top I0 moins 5 minutes.
And that voice you heard just now was the DDO that Frederic was just explaining to us, the Director of Operations. So we're going to do our best to not audibly step over them. So if you hear us abruptly stop our commentary, we just want to make sure we are listening in and hearing those callouts as they come. Just got a quick glance at some of the teams that have made this launch possible. Obviously, thousands of people all around the world are watching the progress of this launch, and the countdown now just a little more than 4 minutes away from lifting off. The upper stage LOX tank topping up, finished up about T-minus 4 minutes, 50 seconds. Same with the lower stage LOX tank and the lower stage LH2 tank. We're just a little more than 30 seconds away from the upper stage liquid hydrogen tank topping off, wrapping up. And at that point, the Ariane 6 rocket will be fully loaded with all of its propellant and getting ready to lift off. Just a little more than 3 minutes to that point. Point, teams are also in the process of synchronizing the launch sequence. So control of operations has now switched over from the ground to the rocket itself. Now a little less than 3 minutes to the planned liftoff of this inaugural flight of the Ariane 6 rocket. Again, coming up, we'll see the Vulcain main engine ignite at T-minus 7 seconds. And then the 2 solid rocket boosters will ignite at T0, and we'll see a liftoff at that point as well. If you see from the strong back there, the yellow lines that extend out to the rocket, those are the feed lines. Those will, of course, retract prior to launch. Now less than 2 minutes to liftoff. Taking a close-up look at that Vulcain engine. That will be igniting at the T-minus 7 second mark. Now less than a minute and a half. And as we come into the final minute here, let's go ahead and listen in to the final countdown and any callouts from the DDO.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins d'une minute. Top I0 moins une minute.
Can you hear me?
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Top. Allumage 2 ESR, décollage. Propulsion nominale. Trajectoire nominale. Pilotage calme, trajectoire nominale. Trajectoire nominale, pilotage calme. Trajectoire nominale.
We're now a little more than a minute and a half into this inaugural flight of an Ariane 6 rocket. So far, as you're hearing in French, everything is nominal with this mission. Coming up in less than 30 seconds, at about T plus 2 minutes and 16 seconds, those two solid rocket boosters on the side of the first stage will separate. The fairings will be deployed at T plus 3 minutes, 39 seconds. About 10 seconds to booster separation. And there goes those two solids.
Séparation des ESR.
And bit of applause heard in the Jupiter room.
Propulsion nominale, trajectoire nominale.
And there you see some onboard camera views of that moment we just saw.
Trajectoire nominale.
Next milestone coming up in less than 40 seconds when the payload fairings will separate, exposing the payloads to the vacuum of space for the first time on this flight. One of the payloads is a camera system on board that is designed to capture about 180 minutes of this mission.
Pilotage calme, trajectoire nominale.
The area of the payload. There you can see those.
De la coiffe.
There go the fairings. Hopefully we'll get an onboard camera view of that as well. They've switched, of course, to this animated version of what they're expecting to see. You can see one of those payload fairings falling away from now. This is a real-time onboard camera.
Trajectoire nominale, propulsion nominale.
You can see the telemetry data in the map above the two boxes you see here on the center of your screen. On the left are the onboard camera views and now the DDO inside the control room. On the right-hand side, those are computer model renderings of the payloads that are hitching a ride on board this inaugural flight of an Ariane 6. Vulcan 2.1 engine will continue this burn until about 7.5 minutes into flight, at which point it will cut off, and then 6 seconds later, the upper stage will separate. It'll be followed less than 10 seconds after that by the first ignition of the Vinci engine. Frederic, bringing you back into the conversation as we're awaiting the next couple of events here with the engine cutoff and then stage separation. Just your initial thoughts on, you know, what we were hoping to see so far on the flight, a good liftoff, a good booster separation. They've got to be ecstatic there down in French Guiana.
I'm sure, and here too in the VIP room, people are very happy, but they know that it's far from over. But the critical launch, the first steps are looking pretty good. Already now they are close to 180 kilometers altitude, and everything looks good. Propulsion, trajectory, data are good. So let's cross our fingers to see if it keeps going this way. And the amazing thing from just viewers like us is that they have improved by far. We see that SpaceX effect made cameras improving the views of the launch, separation, boosters. Every time they seem to be artificial use, and it's they improve their cameras obviously, and the angles and the telemetry to get these pictures down, these images down.
Yeah, you mentioned the SpaceX effect. I think certainly, you know, with the numerous Falcon 9 launches that we see on a weekly basis, combined with obviously the recent flight of Starship and getting those spectacular views through reentry, I think have really raised the bar for launch providers on what the public now, almost expects for these missions.
We just heard that the range is the people in charge of the range in Kourou the mission is over. They don't have to intervene anymore.
And it looks like a good first ignition of the Vinci engine as well.
Yep.
Following stage separation.
Allumage du moteur Vinci.
So that's, of course, critical second step.
Propulsion nominale.
Okay, people. The amazing
stage separation there.
The amazing thing is that in Paris, you hear the window where I'm working are open, and you hear the people shouting all over Paris, but not because Ariane's success, it's because they have a soccer game, very important, where France is involved. So it's amazing to see.
Well, hopefully at the game they have a second or a part of the screen where they can put up the launch for those wanting to watch.
I'm not sure about that, but we'll see.
Well, maybe folks will have their smartphones with them so they can be looking up at the pitch and then down at their phones to see what's happening.
Exactly, yes.
So where we are right now in the mission, we're T plus 9 minutes, 15 seconds and counting.
With the amazing views.
Yeah, we're getting some great live views of the Vinci engine on its first burn in space now with this mission. And it will continue this burn until about T plus 18 minutes, 32 seconds into flight when it will cut off. And then it will go into a coast phase for the better part of about 40 minutes. But as you're saying, just, some spectacular views of our little planet down below as it continues its ascent.
And it is also interesting to see the trajectory, which is exactly what the launch controllers get on their screen. It's a live trajectory, and sometime when on previous launches where they had some anomalies, you could see the anomaly right away on this kind of trajectory because you see the nominal one and you see the real one with the little cross. So things are still looking good at this point, more than 10 minutes after liftoff.
Yeah, and as you said, good at this point, quite a ways to go as the mission timeline extends out to T plus 2 hours and 40 minutes. The last separation command will be issued right about 2 hours, 40 minutes after we saw the liftoff, and that'll be to release the 2 capsules. If you recall, for folks watching, at the top of the upper stage, you saw those sort of roundish items, one that was sort of like a small white dome, another was more of a tan dome. Those are the 2 capsules that will be released back. One is the Nix Bikini, and the other is Space Case, or SCX-01. And those will be the last to be released in this mission. As we're awaiting this next milestone, want to take a quick peek at our live chat here. I know it's been a minute since I've popped over and talked to all of you, but really appreciate those who have been with us for our live coverage as we've cruised on for a little more than an hour so far. I want to give a special shout to our wonderful member community here on YouTube as well, since you allow us to do what we do here at Spaceflight now. So thanks to folks like John G, Jeff Hansen, I'm Lita, Deborah Jean, Red Dawn, that Opal guy, and many others. Channel membership, of course, comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our Cape-based launch liftoffs in 4K. Speaking of the next launch from the Cape, we are tracking that mission for in the wee hours of Sunday morning coming up this weekend. Before then, though, we have another Falcon 9 launch with a batch of Starlink satellites on board. That is the Starlink 9-3 mission, which is coming up, lifting off from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. That is coming up tomorrow evening, as a matter of fact. So we'll have live launch coverage, of course, for both of those missions. And as one other bit of programming note, there, of course, is going to be a couple of important updates coming tomorrow on the crew flight test of Boeing Starliner spacecraft. We'll be hearing directly from NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams tomorrow morning, currently still on the International Space Station. And then we'll be hearing from Steve Stitch, the head of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, as well as from Mark Nappy, head of CCP from the Boeing side of things. So looking to learn more about the mission currently in progress, some of the testing that they've been doing on the thrusters on the Starliner spacecraft that they've been working down at White Sands to get as much data as they can before they create a timeline for the return of Butch and Sunny for a touchdown in the Southwest.
Nominal. Fin de visibilité par la station de Saint-Jean-du-Maroni.
Turning back to this mission now, L plus 14 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. Frederic, that map that we saw just a moment or two ago that looked like it was showing the next ground station coming up. Is that in fact what we were seeing? Because we're now back to the animated version of the upper stage. So I'm guessing we're in a bit of a handover period, essentially, from one ground tracking satellite to another, or ground tracking dish, I should say.
Yes, indeed. Yes, we are in between two missions, and we see the inclination is pretty high because obviously the trajectory will go over Europe in the next half hour, as we can see it. It's going north. But of course, they have some ground station, not only in North Africa, but especially you have some ESA station in Spain to track. So soon, I believe they will be able to follow what's going on, especially on this first mission. They want to know exactly what is going on. If there was a failure, they need the telemetry, the constant telemetry, all the data.
Yeah, obviously that's incredibly important to make sure they've got a good stream of that.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
So we are just about 2.5 minutes right now until the cutoff of the Vinci engine. Then it will go into its first coast phase. So again, this is not a short mission by any stretch of the imagination, but an important one, going to demonstrate a lot of capabilities of the upper stage of the Ariane 6 with 3 separation commands of the CubeSat payloads. And then, of course, the capsule separation, capping things off. And there's that ground station we were just talking about, right? The Santa Maria. It's in the Portuguese island. Azores.
Il reste moins d'une minute du moteur de l'étage supérieur, Vinci.
It looks like they've got a good acquisition of signal from the ground now, getting those on camera or on board views from the upper stage of Ariane now. We're about 20 seconds away from that engine cutoff. A lot of principals there in that front row. I can only imagine what's going through their minds at this point in time.
Extinction du Vinci.
So some clapping and some satisfaction there. Looks like a good cutoff of the upper stage engine. At this point,
Nominale.
as you just heard, they're still in a nominal phase of the mission, going into that first coast phase at this point in time. Vinci engine will reignite at T plus 56 minutes, 20 seconds, and that'll be a comparatively short burn, lasting just 22 seconds in total. But helping to maintain the correct temperatures on the cryogenics on the upper stage, the first auxiliary propulsion unit was powered up just before the 9-minute mark into this flight, and it will stay active until T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, 36 seconds. And that'll be just before the first separation command is issued. And those will all come in fairly rapid succession at that point. We're now L plus 25 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. You can see the upper stage passing over the British Isles right now as we are continuing to track this coast phase for the rocket, coming up on the next time this Vinci engine will ignite. It's coming up at T plus 56 minutes and 20 seconds. And again, that will be a relatively brief 22-second burn. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank a few folks for your support this afternoon. Appreciate Flippers79, Flip Diaz for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate you. My mother joining us from the west coast of the United States over in California. Hello there, Mom. Norman Reitzel, one of our wonderful channel members, with a $10 super chat. Appreciate you, Norman. Jim Walls joining with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Jim. We're glad to have you with us. And a thanks to Kixios for a €1 super chat. Appreciate that. We're in another period right now in between the ground stations, so looking to get on board camera views back in the next little bit as they complete the next handover. Likely transitioning to a ground station there in France. Also want to thank Clistia Lee, one of our wonderful moderators, for not only holding down the fort this afternoon here in the live chat, but also for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Clistia. And to our newest 5 channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Clistia in the live chat. We're currently at L plus 34 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. At this point, we are just about 20 or so minutes away from the ignition of the upper stage Vinci engine. That burn again lasting just about 22 seconds in total, the second of 3 burns. 2 burns are going to happen before the CubeSats are deployed, and then there will be another burn prior to the capsule separation. But as we are sort of at a bit of a lull in the principal action here, Frederic, who's of course still at the European Space Agency headquarters there in Paris, has had the opportunity to pop downstairs and take the pulse of the VIPs who have gathered here for this opportunity, taking some time away from potential soccer matches. So, Frederic, going downstairs and seeing some of the folks that are around, what's the mood? I'm sure it was jubilant.
Exactly. The mood was jubilant, and there are hundreds of people seated, but they were very joyful, applauding at every step of the liftoff, and then the next operation of Ariane 6. And everybody was quite impressed, including some of my colleagues that I've seen, that everything went without a hitch. Usually there are always a last minute thing about a green light, red light on a minor detail or weather or things. And here, okay, it's everything went well. So people are very, very, very excited. Among the VIPs, you have a lot of VIPs, a lot of military, as I told you. The military are quite happy because hopefully if things go well until the end of the mission, in the next mission or the next mission, there is a critical intelligence satellite that the French military wants to have in orbit, and that's the kind of satellite that is not launched on the Falcon 9. It remains in France or in French Guiana. So I'm sure they are relieved about seeing this beginning of success. Then we'll see. You had also Frederic Dallest. Frederic Dallest, of course, is not known, not even in France, but is the father of one of the 2 fathers of the Ariane. He is the guy who conceived Ariane in a long time ago in the 70s, and he was here, very calm, no big speech, but he was happy to see that things are going well and smoothly, both. So we see that there is a next generation who is doing the job, and it's of course it's very important because Europe is putting a lot of money to keep its autonomy, to have this access to space. When I was speaking yesterday with the lady, the research minister, who 10 years ago, the French research minister, secretary, let's say, who started this program, and I was telling her, okay, it cost something over $4 billion to develop Ariane 6. It's 4 years late, and then there will be some subsidies. And she told me, but look, of course it's expensive, but first it's an illusion to think that rockets everywhere in the world are not just a commercial business, even after decades of space history. In the States, even the incredible success of SpaceX, Falcon, and other companies is because NASA is here, because the Pentagon is here. So that's the big, rich institution. So a rocket is an investment. At this point, she was telling me, her name is Mrs. Fioraso, Geneviève Fioraso. She was telling me, but look, the money invested by China, the money invested by India in space program, in Japan, everywhere. So to be still in the game, we need to make these investments, and they are not $4 or $5 billion is not a huge amount, as we know, for a whole new generation of a big or heavy launcher. So she was telling it's a requirement if Europe wants to stay in the race. And even we saw this Ariane 6 development. It's only developed by 16 countries. So it's not all ESA. ESA is almost 30 countries joining ESA. So it's and another aspect very important in Europe. Not only there is this kind of geopolitical importance of having Ariane 6, but it's also for the industry. And we were underlining earlier, it's costly. Of course, it's much more costly to have an Ariane 6 than a Falcon 9 because you have 16 countries where their own industry is working on this program. So it's a little bit like in during the Cold War, where you had all the aerospace industry in the States, in a lot of different states. In terms of risk, of geopolitical risk, but also for the industry. As we know, every state representative tried to have a part of the cake, a part of the industry in their state. So it's even more important in Europe, where the countries want to invest, but they want to have also the industry. So it's very important. That's why we need to have new generation also of rockets. It's not just technical progress. It's also to keep the industry alive. Otherwise, the industry collapse. That's what a lot of politicians in Europe, not only in France, are underlining. And France is, by the way, I was checking the numbers, is investing 53 or 54% in this Ariane 6, when other countries put much less. So France is really the leading force in this program. It has always been like this since General de Gaulle. It's a long time ago. It's a past history of France. But General de Gaulle was invited in the early 60s in Baikonur in a secret flight. They never told to the general, who was the president of France at the time, that he would go to Baikonur, or where it was located. He was going just with his military attaché. There were two people to see a launch from Baikonur. And when he came back, he started the whole program, missiles on one side and civilian rockets on the other side. That's how they started the idea, the concept of having rockets and not to be dependent on foreign countries. And Mrs. Fioraso was telling me yesterday, we remember in the 70s, French people were very close, even closer than today, working with NASA. And there was a European satellite called Symphony. And on the American side, it was NASA and the government say, oh, no problem, we launch your satellite, just pay the little part of it and we launch it. But then they say, oh, yeah, you can launch it, no problem. But and they did launch from Cape Canaveral. But then they say, oh, that's a communication satellite. You are forbidden to use it for commercial purposes. It's just for your country. So at that point, a lot of European leaders say, okay, we need to have our own launcher. We won't depend even on our best allies, the US, the Americans, to have our autonomy. And that's why they invested so much money like other countries. And now all the big powers in the world are investing not billions, dozens of billions of dollars in their program everywhere. And except perhaps Russia, because Russia has other trouble, so they have less money, but they're also the big initiators of these space programs. This is my presentation about, but that was the sum up of the discussion I had with a former minister, Mrs. Fioraso, who put really this Ariane 6. She went all around Europe and she made a decision. So she's very happy and she's in Kourou right now.
Well, I think that's all really excellent context to put this moment in, and especially just picking up on one of the last points you made of, why, because I'm sure there will be people watching this launch coverage and, the future of the Ariane 6 rocket and thinking, well, you've got all these rockets from all these countries all over the world, especially here in the United States, SpaceX launching 2, 3 times, maybe more a week, you know, why why is the Ariane 6 needed? And I think, for exactly the reason you just mentioned, because it's not just, the institutional missions that it's going to launch, but also being able to commercialize it and really tap into that marketplace that, exists right now and will continue to flourish and blossom over the next 5, 10, 20 years from now. Uh, you know, it's important for there to be, a rocket that, Europe can depend on to be able to carry out those missions and, not go through some extra hoops and hurdles to potentially launch, from here in the States with, Vulcan or Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, eventually New Glenn. And, going back to another point that you made of, this having, hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidy investments on an annual basis, I think folks can, look at the commercialization of a Falcon 9, a Falcon Heavy, for example, or even, um, the Vulcan rocket, which has launched one time so far, looking to launch at least a couple more times before the year is out, if all goes well. SpaceX and ULA, rely in no small part on getting very lucrative, uh, you know, federal contracts with the Department of Defense through U.S. Space Systems Command on behalf of the Space Force, as well as the National Reconnaissance Office through the National Security Space Launch procurement process, which they're getting ready to, announce more of those awards later this year. They announced the companies that are going to be vying for what's called the lane one of this 2-lane future contract. So a lot of, federal dollars going into these, commercial launchers, which also serve customer payloads, but it should not be, lost in the background of that, they're still getting quite a bit of money from the federal government and for developmental purposes too. Obviously, if you look at Launchpad Live right now, you can see a super heavy booster down there at Starbase in southern Texas, which is, getting ready to support the 5th flight of Starship. But you've got the Human Landing System program, which is managed by NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, offering a lot of their expertise to both SpaceX and Blue Origin as they're getting their launchers, or their landers, I should say, ready for future Artemis missions. So all that to say, it's all, tied into the governments where these launchers are based. However commercialized they become on the one hand, the tie to the nation that they're from is, and the, the sort of greater regional ecosystem, still very important. Case in point with the
Exactly.
Ariane 6.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. There is, I don't know if we have time now, but also there was a big debate in Europe, because of course everybody worldwide is impressed by the successes of Falcon 9, and then there was this big debate: should Europe had to choose a reusable or partially reusable rocket? And as we know, Ariane 6 is not reusable. It's the classical rocket where you lose most of it. And that, when I asked this question to the top manager of ESA, of CNES, the French Space Agency, they told me, we don't have enough satellites to launch to justify reusability of the rocket. That's a basic thing. On the average, they are targeting about 9 launches per year with Ariane 6. A reusable rocket costs much more money than a classical rocket like Ariane 6. And then what do you do with if you have only 9 launches per year? That doesn't work. You need at least, the equation we hear in Europe is that you need at least 25 launches a year to justify a reusable system. Otherwise, it doesn't work economically at all. That is the analysis here.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the calculus that ULA is also factoring in with the Vulcan rocket and getting them to that 25 launch per year cadence with that vehicle, and looking at ways that they can reuse the B4 engines on the booster stage there. So that makes sense that that's about that threshold.
Yeah. Okay. And so what we, yeah.
Go ahead, please.
The amazing thing, we have time, and the amazing thing is that I was checking, I followed Ariane from the first Ariane L01 in this very same building at the headquarters. It's amazing that during 3 decades, the Ariane program, the Ariane 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they were leading the commercial market by far. I mean, it's 2/3 of the satellites worldwide, not just in the Western world, were launched by Ariane. And that was, I think, for 2 reasons when I was looking at that and speaking to former managers, is that first, of course, it was an outstanding rocket. We said it already. That's why we could put James Webb on such kind of rocket. But also, it was a golden age for Ariane until, let's say, 5-10 years ago, because of the shuttle strategy in the US. It's once the US decided to have only the shuttle for manned space flights and commercial satellites, and then you had Challenger and Veto. Yes, you want to comment, perhaps?
Oh, just to let folks know what you're seeing here on the side of the screen. This is a launch replay. Of course, there's not just a secret Ariane 6 that's launching for a second time. Just to clarify that for anyone who might be confused as to what's happening. It launched more than 51 minutes ago. This is just a multi-camera view replay of it with some really nice angles there. But anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, I know it's very important to have the different cameras that were analyzing exactly how the launcher behaves. So I was saying that this Ariane was so lucky somehow to be not only a very good technology, but also to be the only game in town. So of course, once the White House decided to forbid the shuttle to be used for commercial purposes, okay. And most of the rockets, classical rockets in the US, didn't exist anymore because of this policy. Of course, the people had to rely on Ariane. So it makes the best years. And even at the time, we say, okay, Ariane and Ariane Space made a lot of money, and it's true, they made a lot of money. But still, you need some government countries to invest in the rocket industry, to make it livable and to make it even to have some commercial activity with it. You cannot go from scratch and to do a business out of a rocket. You need always big investments.
Absolutely. And for our viewers watching right now, the reason that we're getting some views back inside launch control is we are now just a little less than 4 minutes away from the ignition of the Vinci upper stage engine, which will perform a nominal 22-second burn. So it's coming up at T plus 56 minutes, 20 seconds. So we may hear again from the DDO in the next couple of minutes here. So we'll try not to let our commentary cross over on that. And actually, let's go ahead and we'll pull back on our commentary for now until we get through that burn, and then we'll be back with you with more commentary on the other side, just since we don't know exactly when their call outs are going to come, and we want to be sure to listen into this moment. Is a very key part of the mission right now. The first time that a Vinci engine will nominally reignite in space. just as a quick note before we pull back on the commentary again, as we cross the 55-minute mark, as you can see from the telemetry data above the views in the Jupiter room and the animation view of the upper stage of the Ariane 6 rocket, looking for acquisition of signal from the ground station there in Australia. So looking to get some upper stage views, hopefully before the ignition of the Vinci upper stage engine, which will perform a 22-second burn that's coming up now in less than a minute.
Acquisition de la télémesure par la station de Nounorcia. Deuxième allumage Vinci.
A good call out from
Nominale. Inspection du moteur Vinci.
good call out from the DDO there. Some celebration in the room. As we heard the call that the Vinci engine ignited and then cut off again as nominally expected.
L'orbite atteinte à la fin du deuxième boost Vinci est correcte.
So, Frederic, bringing it back here again. I took a little bit of French in high school and college, but I admit I'm a little rusty these days. So if you wouldn't mind playing translator for us and relaying what we're hearing from the DDO.
Yes, the end of the burn of the Vinci worked perfect. The Vinci cutoff was good, and the second Vinci boost worked well. And now we are expecting the APU, auxiliary propulsion unit, to cut off in a few minutes, and everything looks nominal. They are quite happy about it, and we heard the applaud and people applauding in Kourou, but also here at the ESA headquarters. Things are looking good.
Certainly the calls they want to hear, and the Director General posting on X, formerly Twitter, that with that burn, the upper stage has now circularized its orbit as they're preparing to deploy the first set of CubeSats. So, like you were saying, Frederic, just a good marker of success so far with this mission. Obviously, you don't want to count your chickens before they all hatch, but so far the first couple of eggs seem to be, have hatched pretty well.
Yeah, the people start to breathe again. The most critical things are going well, and the sequence of the mission is going on, and exactly as expected.
And one of the things we did touch on this earlier in the broadcast, but now that we've actually seen the reignition and a good burn, a good shutdown of the Vinci engine, can you just really, for those who are used to a Falcon 9 launch, and its ability to reignite the Merlin vacuum engine. How big of a deal it is for the Ariane, vehicle now to have this capability of doing, as you were mentioning, up to 5 relights of this engine.
It's very important because, of course, during the golden age we were describing, where Ariane was the leading rocket on the commercial market worldwide, most of the satellites, almost all of them, were going to geostationary orbit, and so the launch was just one shot almost to go to the higher point of the orbit and then to circularize, and that was it. Now with the constellation, the game is totally different, and it has totally changed. At the time, 10 years, 20 years ago, that didn't exist. So really, when they started this Ariane 6 program, the idea was exactly to fit the market with this critical Vinci engine, and that's, of course, it's exactly the vehicle needed on the market, and that's crucial to the success of Ariane 6.
Yeah, and so far it seems like it's performing as well as they expected it to. They're not going to need as much capability as it possibly can handle, but certainly it's got a good way so far with this mission. Want to bring in the ESA broadcast visually, not the audio, Stephen, into our view here, just as they're reviewing some of the payloads that are going to be deployed with this mission. So just to give our audience a visual of some of the things that are going to be sent off into orbit coming up in the next few minutes. The shutoff of the auxiliary propulsion unit happens at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 36 seconds. And then the first separation command will be issued at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 53 seconds. The second, 3 seconds after that. And then the third, about 6 seconds after that. So things will be moving pretty quickly coming up in the next several minutes. And we're just getting a visual overview of some of the payloads that are on board here. So, Frederic, as we're taking a look at some of these CubeSats that are going to be released in the next few minutes, notable comparing this first inaugural launch to the first Ariane 5 mission, that they decided to send off these array of CubeSats as opposed to a much larger singular dedicated mission. Can you speak to the significance of that and maybe some of the thinking behind putting these types of payloads on board for this first flight?
I think it was a good compromise because 26 years ago, when they launched in 1996, the first Ariane 5, I remember it was amazing. All the engineers and managers would tell you, "Oh, we have the the most reliable launcher in the world. Before launch, I was saying that because Ariane 5, and it was true, has been built for a small European shuttle called Hermes. And so it was built with, it's true, with some specification of manned spaceflight. And so they were so almost arrogant about, oh, it's the most reliable thing before flying it. And at the time, they choose to put these clusters satellites, which were an incredible research mission for hundreds of PhD students. So it was risky. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. We're just
no problem.
Less than 10 seconds away from that first separation command. So
exactly, yes.
Let's go ahead and listen in and see if we can hear the DDO call that.
Extinction APU.
APU, auxiliary propulsion unit cutoff, was good, confirmed. A few seconds away from
Début de la séquence de séparation des CubeSats.
So we've got onboard video now. And we'll see. Yep, there we go. Some actual deployment video of those CubeSats.
Yep.
So at this point in the all of the CubeSats should have been deployed. Is that the call that we just heard?
Yes, confirmed. Yes, they are so happy that the CubeSat have been released properly, exactly on the timeline and the right schedule. They are very small satellites, but everything works well. The release at the right altitude.
And just to go back to what we were talking about a second ago of, you know, the decision to have this as the principal payload. Do you think that, you know, it's still the right call, or do you think, you know, given the success they've seen so far, that they maybe were wishing they'd had a larger payload on board, or was this, you know, the right sort of risk management for something like this mission?
No, it's risk management, because at the time it was difficult, very difficult to have a reflight. They lost hundreds of millions of dollars with the 4 clusters. Hundreds of PhD students couldn't do their work until they rebuilt it. And I remember the science director promised to find the money to have a reflight, but that was quite difficult and costly. So the rule of the game is to go in with a classical approach and to put some margin before flying expensive and critical payloads. And CubeSats, and even as we know, the first mass is a neutral mass made with I think concrete or something similar to that, which is a neutral mass on which the CubeSats are installed.
Gotcha. Yeah. Just speaking to sort of more inert style payloads, of course, you know, as we and others have reported, United Launch Alliance is having to pivot to an inert payload for their second certification mission on the Vulcan rocket because, you know, the Dream Chaser space plane is not ready to fly on time, and they need to get that rocket certified so they can start flying their important national security customer missions later this year. So sounds like we're getting some audio in from the Jupiter room. Let's listen in for a second.
They are jubilant, yes. We'll have the official speeches now of the key managers. When they applaud like this, is that they are okay. They know that it's 100% successful.
That's got to be a good feeling. And obviously, congratulations have already started coming in from folks like the NASA administrator. Let's listen in.
Yeah, you can see the
very warm welcome to
director
of
ESA, DG.
Establishments, also of course here in Kourou. It is electric here. There's such a good mood. There's such a fantastic feeling here. But let me really just express a few emotions from my side. A big thank you to all of those people who have worked on this launcher. We are making history now. We're making history. We are succeeding. We still have a bit of work to do, just to be very precise, but we have made very important steps. We had the third separation command of the payload. We had the APU, we had the APU firing and cut off. We had the upper stage firing cut off, the Vinci engine. Everything is nominal. Everything is going so well, and this is such a beautiful moment. So thank you, industry. Thank you, task force members. Ariane Group, Ariane Space, CNES, we have been working together with my team of ESA. Everyone has been really giving its best to make this a success. It's a historic day for ESA. It's a historic day for space in Europe. It's a historic day for Europe because this powers up Europe, because we need the data from the satellites that our Ariane rocket will launch in the future. So big thank you, big day to celebrate from our side.
So Joseph has said it all, so I'm not sure I have much more to say, but Europe is back. Europe is back in space, so this is perhaps a very important
This is the
moment.
boss.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
of the French Space Agency.
French Guiana, to CSJ team, who has been working very, very well and was very challenged over the last few years. So it's a great moment, and Europe is back in space. So thanks a lot.
So good afternoon, good evening in Europe. Today, Ariane is back. And today, with this new launcher, Europe is restoring its autonomous access to space, and we all know how important this is for all of us. But what I would like to share as a feeling is first my sense of relief. It's quite visible after such a success, but also a sense of pride for all the teams who have been working for this program. The thousands of rocket makers from Ariane Group, from all the European industrial partners, from 13 countries who have been working tirelessly on this program to overcome the challenges. It has been a difficult program, and their work enables us today to see such a brilliant success. So I'd like to congratulate all of you, to thank all of you, and really I'm proud of your talent and your dedication. Second topic, because you've got customer here, is that now we have to ramp up production to serve our customers. It is already ongoing, and it starts by a next launch before a year end, and this will be another interesting episode in the saga. And the last topic I'd like to mention is that the mission is not yet completed. The upper stage is still in orbit, maneuvering, and we are expecting a lot of precious information to prepare for the future. So, go Ariane 6, go!
So I want first to thank all the member states who have participated in the funding of the program. We have here former Minister Geneviève Furazo, we have Anna Christmann, space coordinator in Germany, and it would not have been possible without their continuous support. So thanks to all of the member states of ESA who made this success possible.
The second thing I want to say is to, as said by Martin, to congratulate all teams. This decision has been made since a decade, and all teams who have worked for this success in the agencies, in industry, is an outstanding Team Europe, and today it is their success, and they must be very proud of what they have achieved. And last but not least, it's our customers. During these years, the customers stand on our side. We have a backlog of 29 launches to deliver for both institutional and commercial customers. It would not have been possible without their trust and without their loyalty to Arianespace. So my thought now is going to our customers who have been on our side, and now we must deliver. And I am very proud to announce that what has been achieved since 1 hour and 6 minutes and what is currently being achieved allows us to make a mission for the French MOD by the end of the year, and it would be the second mission of Ariane 6 and the first operational mission. Thank you very much. Now we can.
Okay.
Looks like they're giving a little bit of love to the DDO there, who's obviously been hard at work in this mission. Not gonna take the mic by the looks of it, but lots of thumbs up and applause. And someone next to him on console, tapped his shoulder,
Yeah.
made sure he looked around, said, "Hey, take your moment in the sun because you earned it along with those guys upstairs." So just to sort of bookend what we were just hearing from all of those figureheads, Frederic, culminating in that final statement, which you had talked about earlier in the broadcast, of the next mission being the first operational flight for Ariane 6, an important government operational mission. Can you talk a little bit more about that from your reporting on this upcoming flight?
So for the first time, and I think perhaps it was a diplomatic mistake, I'm not sure, when Stéphane Israël, the Ariane Space, the entity which commercialized Ariane, said that by the end of the year we'll have a military payload on board. I think it should have been announced by the Defense Ministry and the people in charge, but perhaps has been. I don't know the details, but usually, anyway, he made his job for the business of Ariane, and he announced that that will be the next payload. So it's the French defense that will that will launch. Excuse me, can I, Willie? Can I 1 second, because we have Julio. I have
Yes,
to
of
catch him.
course.
He's a very important person.
Yes. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier in our broadcast, we're going to be joined in a minute or two here by Julio Bonreal, who is a former Ariane launch director of operations and has extensive experience in performing duties on console for the Ariane program. So looking forward to talking with him. So we're just going to get that set up and we'll bring him into the conversation as well. It's been a busy morning or evening for him, certainly, getting through all of the launch operations and reaching this milestone.
So.
And so, of course, one of the benefits of having Frederic there at ESA headquarters is the opportunity to have some special guests join us. And we are going to be joined now by Julio Monreal, who is a former Ariane launch director of operations. So, Frederic, I'll let you further introduce our guests there beside you.
Yeah, Julio had the incredible experience on Ariane 5 and work also on Ariane 6.
Yes.
But we has very limited time, so we have to be short and focus on the question. So, how happy you are, and what has been the best part of this mission?
Well, I think we are all very, very happy because the first launch of Ariane 6 so far is perfect. So everything has been working as planned. We still have to do some experience in orbit just to for the future, and we have also to re-enter. But the part of the mission, what the more important has been done with complete success. So the liftoff was perfect. The separation, the reignition of the engine, the upper stage was also perfect. Separation of the satellite, about microsatellites from different universities in Europe. One microsatellite from NASA, it's important to say. So we are very, very happy. Really, we worked for that, and I think we are rewarded to have this result.
And Julio, in the flight that we've seen so far, was there, or I guess, what was the moment when it passed, when you sort of were able to really take a deep breath and feel confident of where things were in the mission?
We are very confident on the mission.
But which part, at which moment, which step you were feeling that relief, really, that things were going so well?
I think, liftoff, but I would say liftoff is maybe, it was all the system, because there was a new system with the separation of the cryo arms that was new with respect to Ariane 5. We have done a lot of tests of separation, etc., but never with a launcher liftoff. So this was one important point. Then, of course, another important point was the separation of the boosters, very, very clean and soft separation. And then the reignition of the engine of the upper stage, because Ariane 6 is designed, is made to do different reignitions of the upper stage till 4 reignitions when needed. So this time this mission will be doing 2, and this was a very important moment, the reignition of the upper stage, because it's a new stage, a new engine, a new capability. So yes, that was maybe, technically speaking, one of the most important.
And the APU was also very important.
And the APU, of course, the APU, I was not talking, but the APU has been working in time and perfectly. You know that we have this APU, the auxiliary propulsion unit, which is a kind of little gas generator, so doing some thrust, very low thrust, to 200, 300 newtons, but it's also heating the oxygen and the hydrogen and injecting in the tanks to pressurize the tanks to do not use the helium. You know, the helium is very expensive. So the APU is just doing something which is important to reduce the price of the launcher. And also is managing the propellants. The propellants are, cryo propellants, so cryogenic. They don't have to go everywhere in the tank, so they have to be in the back of the tank. And the APU, with this thrust, I was saying before, is putting always the propellants on the back and ready to reignite the engine. So, and finally, he's also used to make a fine-tuning of the reboost.
That will be at the end of the mission.
Well, you do every time there is a reboost, there is a fine-tuning by APU.
A last question, because I think Julio has to run to another.
Excuse me. I am the only one in Paris from the Space Transportation Directorate, and I have a lot of people around.
Yeah, it's true that everybody wants Julio here. A last question, Willie?
Yeah, so a last question for me. obviously, things have been going very well with the mission so far, and you've gotten a lot of great data down, both, visually as well from the sensors. When you have a chance after this mission is complete to really comb through all of the sensors that are on board the rocket and, go through all the various pieces of video that you have from the liftoff, what are you most looking forward to, really digging into, and what are, I guess, the sort of linchpins, if you will, from looking at the data to getting ready for the second flight of Ariane?
Yes, well, now we will have a lot of data. Not only the video, which is very nice, of course, it's just not only for communication, but also for technical reasons. It's important to see things. But we have a lot of data. I would say we have twice the data of a normal launch, because it's a first launch. So we have to go through this data and check that the behavior of every parameter is as planned, as foreseen, because we have absolutely all the data has been, if you want, has been simulated. So we have the behavior they have to do. So we have to check that the behavior is good, that every part of the launcher, every equipment is doing well. So it will take some months. And at the end of the year, before the end of the year, we will have the second launch of Ariane 6. And by now, for what I see and with my experience, I think that this will be a very, very, if I can say, technically easy task, because we have the impression that everything was on time and perfectly phased with the rest of the mission. So we have a lot of work, but I think it will be a very interesting work and very positive work preparing the next launch of the new Ariane 6 launcher.
Based on this excellent success.
Yes.
As far as we see it.
As far as right now. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, Julio,
Okay.
I know you're very much in demand today, so really appreciate you taking some time, and congratulations on the mission so far.
Yes. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julio.
Bye-bye.
And of course, our sincere thanks to Julio Monreal for joining us, and great to take the pulse from from someone who has such a wealth of experience with the Ariane program, and Frederic, to bring you back into here, your impressions of the conversation, brief though it may be, and I know would have loved to spend a wealth more time with him, but just your sense of someone that you've known for so long, and how your thoughts on his comments there.
So of course he works on the ESA side. He's on the ESA side, and we don't have to forget that of course the big work and the big success is on the Ariane group. We speak about more than 1,000 people all over Europe who have been working non-stop with a lot of efforts, a lot of political pressure, a lot of economical pressure, because everybody was criticizing them a lot for the delayed, for the cost, and for also even from the media side, we didn't get enough information. They were very secretive, and so we were are they traumatized, scared? What is the situation? So even until today's launch, it was difficult to get the right information that we get usually. So perhaps now with this success, first we see that how hard they've been working, because as we know, space business is not it's not luck. It doesn't work. It doesn't succeed by coincidence. It succeeds only by incredible amount of work. And so people are very happy all around Europe, Italy, Germany, of course, France, a lot of people, and all the other 16 countries have been participated in this effort to integrate that and to have everything worked in French Guiana, thousands of miles away from here. It's not easy to go to French Guiana, as we know. So it's a big relief for a lot of people, and we have to recognize also us as the press that the job was outstanding about this complex mission.
in speaking of recognition of the press and specifically recognition of you, just in our live chat here, we have a friend of yours that actually is giving a shout, a $10 super chat from Mr. Jim Bank, who says, and I quote, "What a pleasant surprise to see and hear Frederic Castel doing commentary. No one knows more about European space than Frederic. Hello to my old friend."
That's nice. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, old friends, old folks from the shuttle years, and even before. Yes, that was very nice. Yes, so
And
many
I
launches.
was reticent to mention at the top of our broadcast that in addition to your thorough coverage of the Ariane program, you also live down in Miami to cover the shuttle missions. So you're very much familiar with things here in Florida Space Coast and really from Central Florida on down to the Miami area.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the next step now for Iran is great. Now I don't know if you want that we take some time also. There is another point that we could underline, but we can speak about it later on. Up to you.
Yeah, so just as a point in time for our audience, we're a little more than an hour and a half into the mission. The next milestone that we're tracking here is coming up at T plus 1 hour, 51 minutes, 11 seconds. And that'll be the power up for the third time of the APU, the auxiliary propulsion unit. And then there's going to be a good gap more time beyond that until the reignition of the Vinci engine for a third time before the capsule separation. So I think let's go ahead and pause for a minute on our commentary, and then we'll come back to a little bit more detail on that. So we'll save that part of the discussion for just a little bit. So for now, we're going to go ahead and continue to bring you views of the telemetry data coming through and the CG rendering of what the upper stage is doing right now. And we'll be back with you on more commentary in just a little bit.
Thank you very much.
And back again with a little more commentary for you as we're now L plus 1 hour, 40 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Again, the next milestone we're looking at here is the power up for the third time of the auxiliary propulsion unit. And then there will be a sizable gap until the reignition of the Vinci engine at T plus 2 hours, 37 minutes, 15 seconds. So we have a couple more points that we wanted to hit on before we close things out. Obviously, as we've seen and as we've heard, there's been a lot of successes with this first launch of the Ariane 6 rocket so far. As far as the future of this launch vehicle, though, Frederic, it is going to continue to be an expensive venture for some time. And we touched briefly on the subsidies that are coming from the various European states that are contributing to this program. But from the expectations that were set sort of at the inception of this chapter in the Ariane legacy, it's, from your reporting, sounding like it's going to be quite a bit more expensive than the initial bill of goods that was sold, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, when they 10 years ago they started this challenging program, they were hoping that they wouldn't need any more subsidies. About 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago, when an Ariane 5 blew up, the second failure of an Ariane 5, because there was a new engine which didn't work well, they realized that to make the system work economically, they needed to help. So at that point, they invested some money annually, all the countries of Europe, to sustain the system. Because, of course, in Europe, we don't have the Pentagon, and we have to remind the viewers that for space in Europe, although there are more Europeans than Americans, we spend 4 times less than America in space program. And in terms of military, especially without the war of Ukraine, we spend very little, except a few countries like England and France, who have a real military budget. So that makes, of course, very little money to make these launches and to have the industry holding. So at this point now, the last time there was a big ministerial meeting about space programs in Spain last November, they decided to have, at least for the first years, 340 million euros, which is about $365 million per year, just to sustain the business, the industry building Ariane 6. And they hope that if the business, the commercial aspect works well, again, they hope to lower over the years, to lower these subsidies, to go with a better, of course, with a less cost, and to have the 40% cost reduction compared to Ariane 5, because this rocket has been conceived in the way to reduce the cost. The other challenge that mentioned the big boss of Ariane Group is the fact that now there is the ramp up. Now that things seems to be good, there are already 15 launchers well underway. Now they have to finalize them quickly and to go to the second batch already, because they have 30 contracts. So, and this ramp up is challenging because you have to produce quickly and in a reliable way. So by the end of the year, as they said, there will be a military satellite launch for the French defense. Then 6 flights expected next year in 2025, 8 flights in 26, and then in 27 to have 10 flights with a lot of Kuipers launches. That's the program, and that's another challenge, of course. It's not as difficult as the inaugural flight of Ariane 6, but there's a lot of work a lot in the plate of the space industry in Europe.
And in your conversations with some of the head honchos there of the program, you mentioned that the cost will likely be reduced as more commercial operations start getting brought into the program and woven in with the institutional launches. Did you get a sense that they think that at some point in the future that the Ariane 6 rocket will be able to be sustained without having these subsidies? Or does it seem like from your assessment of and your reporting that this is just going to be something that will continue on in perpetuity as long as this rocket's flying?
Probably they will always need subsidies because, as I said earlier, that we don't have enough military spendings and a space military program to sustain enough launches. The rule of the game in that is that with only 9 launches per year, and that will be only in 3-4 years, of course, it's very costly. If you change your business plan and you go to 20 or 30 launches per year, of course, your costs go down. But in the meantime, it's very costly. And the good news in that is that in Europe, they realize that with all the efforts made by the US, by China, by India, to remain in the race, with the top technology, we need to invest in this space program and to have to keep the state of the art in European rocketry.
And going back to a point that we discussed earlier on in the broadcast of the missions that this will be able to launch on behalf of commercial customers there in Europe, as well as some of the other primary institutional missions. How critical is it that the page is starting to be turned now with this first launch of Ariane 6, sort of against the backdrop of several high profile missions that have had to turn over to SpaceX, whether you're talking about and I believe Euclid was going to be on a Soyuz, but the Galileo satellites, EarthCare, and there's some others as well that are going to be flying on the Falcon family of vehicles. Yeah, another Galileo batch as well.
And one EUMETSAT, which is the meteorological satellite. Yes.
Yeah, that was going to be on the third flight of an Ariane 6 rocket that, just within the last month, the announcement came down that they're, taking their ball and going to a different rocket, essentially.
But that was the decision. I checked that thoroughly. It was the decision of 13 countries. It was not the decision of EUMETSAT. EUMETSAT is just like the UN or like international bodies. It's just they apply the votes and they go by the votes. They don't go by. There was no political decision. So from EUMETSAT point of view, it was they had a critical schedule, and the states which are part of EUMETSAT decided, okay, we cannot wait more. We have to launch as early as possible. So that was their choice. But behind that, they have another 2 or 3 satellites that will be launched on Ariane 6 if things are going well, as it seems to be tonight.
So based off of the schedule and the manifest that they have laid out before them for the next few years, does it seem like they're going to be in a spot where they'll be past the pain point of having to, have multiple states, do what they did with that satellite and vote to move it to another rocket so it can get, closer to its original timeline? Or do you think that, we're kind of at the point now where maybe the bleeding is starting to stop?
Yeah, the bleeding, obviously, with this, what seems to be a full success of Ariane 6, things will go. People have to be efficient. I mean, at some point, if things go well, and especially European countries have been invested in their own space industry, they will, of course, come back to Ariane 5, and there will be a preference, but it's not a law. In the US, there is no this kind of free choice. In the US, a lot of institutional launches cannot be launched on foreign launchers. You see, so so it's just a different. It's a very different system. But now I'm sure that the next, if things go well, if there is no main failure in the next at least 3 launches, to feel really comfortable with the Ariane 6 system, things will improve, and they won't have to rely on Falcon 9, on SpaceX or others. Even with Starship, I was a bit astonished. It was a surprise for me, surprised that the director of launchers for ESA, when I said, but if Starship is working well in a couple of years, do you think that could hurt Ariane 6? And he thought that it was really 2 different kind of programs, and that it wouldn't hurt Ariane 6. Time will say if it's true or not.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks in the space social media ecosystem picked up on that line in your reporting, and we're there were a lot of ears that perked up in hearing that type of language. Obviously, a lot of folks very closely watching the Starship program, and like you said, time will tell to see what lanes these 2 launch vehicles will occupy moving down the road. Well, speaking of moving down the road, we have passed the point where the APU has powered up, and the next milestone will be the ignition of the Vinci engine for a relatively brief 27-second burn, coming up at T plus 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 15 seconds. And so at this point, here's what we're going to do for our viewers still hanging tough with us. For those who would like to keep tracking the progress of this mission, obviously there's still milestones left to go. There's still demonstrations left to be shown, including the return capsules being ejected and set off on their course to splash down in the Pacific Ocean. But we're going to wrap things up here on the dedicated stream, and we'll turn the coverage over to Launchpad Live, our 24-hour stream. So for those who want to keep watching the progress of this mission, we'll have that there. And then, of course, on our social media channels, we'll update you with the major milestones as they happen. But want to give a very sincere thank you to our friend Frederic for joining us for these last couple of hours. Some spectacular sights with the Ariane 6 rocket, and more importantly, and for us and for our viewers, some great insight from you and your wealth of experience. So, thanks for being with us. And, where can folks find and follow your work if they'd like to keep up with you?
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you so much, Stephen, who is out of sight but behind the scene and very important. It was a pleasure to share this great experience about Ariane 6. So let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. And I know folks will love to, see you back here on the channel again. So hopefully the next time Ariane 6 is getting ready to fly, or there's other big European launch news, we'd love to have you back on the stream.
And I'm sure that some French people and European people at the headquarters are opening champagne at this point. It's forbidden to drink champagne before full success of a mission. That's the French rule.
Well, fingers crossed that the next hour and some change continue to move well, and some bottles will be popped in the near future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. A pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
The rest of you still on the stream, just want to acknowledge a couple more folks before we go ahead and close things out formally. Thank you to William Alexander for joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level, and to Callistia Lee for a very generous $20 super chat, saying happiest of birthdays to Renee Lynn Weldon's husband, Jose. Hope his day is fantastic. And that'll do it for us in, again, this dedicated stream. But just as a reminder one more time, we'll turn these live views for the duration of the mission over to our 24-hour live channel on Launchpad Live, so you can follow the mission there visually. And we may pop in occasionally with some light commentary on that channel, but principally it will be just visual, and then we'll post some of the major updates as they happen on our social channels, that being X, formerly Twitter, as well as Threads and Facebook. So for our wonderful moderators who have been helping us out in the live chat, a sincere thank you to Callistia Lee and Astro Jen. And I think Astro Joe was popping in at some point as well. So thanks to all of our wonderful moderators in the live chat for helping us out, to Stephen Young, our editor here at Spaceflight Now, for running the technical operations of the broadcast behind the scenes. One more time, a big thank you to Frederic Castel for joining us and offering a wealth of knowledge from ESA Headquarters. And most importantly, thanks to you at home for watching with us along this historic first flight of the Ariane 6 rocket. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, we'll be back with you for live launch coverage tomorrow with the Starlink 9-3 mission. We've got Starlink 10-4 coming up over the weekend, and then looks like another launch from Vandenberg not too long after that. So for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others. And folks, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.